You're listening to The Coffee Hour. I'm Andy Bates.
I'm Oracle Seth.
Thanks to Concordia University, Wisconsin for your support of The Coffee Hour. Find out more about Concordia University, Wisconsin at cuw.edu.
Live uncommon.
It's a privilege to hear what's going on with our friends at Lutheran Heritage Foundation and the great work that they're doing around the world. And always a privilege and a joy to get to talk with their executive director, the Reverend Dr. Matthew Heise. Pastor Heise, thank you so much for being our guest on the Coffee Hour today.
Oh, great to be with you.
So share with us, where is the Lord working through Lutheran Heritage Foundation today to bring the gospel to people in their first language?
He is working everywhere. That is the quick and short answer. But I'm amazed that even in difficult times, we still have so many requests and so many people, I think, hurting right now. So we have really, I think, wonderful means to be able to get books into the hands of people, because we always think about, well, should we do something digitally to reach certainly people in the modern era? And we, in situations of COVID shutdowns, which are, believe me, occurring everywhere around the world, where we have people working, to be able to have literature in their own hands that they can read and share with their children and others, it's truly a godsend.
So what are some of these materials that Lutheran Heritage Foundation publishes and translates?
Well, I think primarily we always use the Ethiopian eunuch as our theme passage. That here is someone with the Bible, and yet he is having difficulty finding his way through it until Philip comes up to him, and Luther knew that too. And so Martin Luther's Small Catechism, I think, is one of the primary books that we produce in many languages now, approaching 100 at least for the Catechism. But also children's Bible story books are very effective, not only for the children themselves, but also for the parents. In many instances, parents who don't really know as much about the story of how God has loved us and saved us through his son, Jesus. So right now, I think Spanish books are probably where we are focusing in particular. Every couple of years since 2008, we have put out a Bible catechism, small catechism in front of the Bible. And so using one of the Spanish translations, what we do is we print that. And now the printing is being finished in Brazil and is ready now to be disseminated throughout South America, Central America, into the Caribbean, and also up here to the United States. And that means actually what this Bible Catechism, which is now our 6th edition, a standalone catechism, which people can actually just begin to kind of look at the catechism itself. Also a children's Garden of Bible Stories is being reprinted, because that thing was printed in 2017 and immediately we ran out. And now a gospel tract that our founder, Pastor Robert Ron, wrote called Jesus Never Fails. And we have that now in Spanish as well. So that is getting ready to be sent out to all these various places, and then to the United States as well.
Thanks be to God for that, that these resources in the Spanish language are being shared in so many places around the world. And I know in years past, you had the opportunity to travel and see a lot of these things happening in person. How are the challenges of this year impacting the work that you're doing to bring these resources in Spanish language and other languages to people around the world?
Well, ironically, we're still able to get those books into people's hands. We're just finding different ways, and through the miracle of the internet and email association and now Zoom, we've been able to connect with so many people. Like most of you, I've been kind of grounded. I certainly can't travel to Europe. Americans aren't allowed in that. And I was talking to Office of International Mission James Krikova, who's having difficulty getting back in there himself. So, behooves us to connect with our own people there. And I've been doing that this week. I was in Latvia on Tuesday, Lithuania yesterday, and I will be traveling to Georgia on Friday, all virtually. As I talked to my mentor Robert Kolb at Concordia Seminary, and he was joking that he was in India one day and Gothenburg, Sweden the next, and he kind of likes it. It's nice not flying in that sardine can halfway around the world, and still able to accomplish so much. And our own partners are doing the same thing. For example, our Latvian director Juris Ulgas was telling me how, he was sending books out to people. Since he can't even go into the Evangelical Lutheran Church of Latvia offices in the center of Riga, and he lives on the outskirts of Riga. So he gets books and he sends them out to people per their request. So I mean, there are so many different ways we can continue to get books into people's hands.
That's outstanding, and thanks be to God that we can still do that. You were mentioning resources in the Spanish language earlier,
right?
And are there other resources? You had mentioned the catechism,
yeah.
and those.
I should say, and this has really been, I think, a wonderful connection. We've connected with the Office of International Mission of the LCMS, and in particular, Pastor Ted Cray, who is the regional director for South and Central America. And Ted and I were both the only ordained missionaries sent out in 2001. He was sent to Venezuela, and I said the smarter one went south. The other one was sent to the frozen tundra, not of Green Bay, but actually Russia, and that was me. So I've known Ted for quite a while there, and we've tried to work closely together. And now, as he is located in the Dominican Republic, we've been working since I took over at LHF 6 years ago on a Spanish hymnal, which is finally coming to fruition. Because, as you can imagine, hymnals are such complex beasts, and I say that lovingly. But Pastor Cray has been working with Pastor Christian Rautenberg in Argentina, and other pastors throughout South and Central America. And this will be basically an LSB type hymnal for Spanish speakers. Will also be used in Spain, by the way. So it's something that we can rely on them as experts in the Spanish language, and then we provide the means for printing that. So that will be, ironically, printed in Thailand and sent to Brazil. Yeah, this is our global world today. We could print it more cheaply and with better paper in Thailand, and that will be shipped over to Brazil. That'll come about probably somewhere in the middle of next year. But it's a hymnal that's going to have over 1,000 pages. And as you can imagine, if sometimes when we do translations, it's always, there's always errors here or there. You didn't dot an I or cross a T. You just didn't get everything perfect there. So you have to, as you reprint it, you re-edit. And the same thing, I mean, you can imagine with a hymnal, you don't want to make those mistakes, because this is something that is a grand enterprise. And so they've really been working hard on this and looking over, making sure they get things spot on. And so we're really looking forward to getting that out next year, and really trying to increase, I think, a lot of the work in the Spanish-speaking world below us here in Central and South America. And to be honest with you, we'll be coordinating through Dr. Ross Johnson there in St. Louis to help disseminate these. He'll help us disseminate books among the various Hispanic missions with whom we work at LCMS throughout the United States. So as we get books up here, we'll store them in our warehouse, and then through Ross's ministration, we'll get that throughout the United States. So it's also a wonderful mission means to reach out to Hispanic through in the United States.
There's so many hands in these projects, so many partnerships, being able to work together with so many people and in different countries all across the world to get these projects done in this wonderful hymnal. That is going to be such a great resource for the Spanish-speaking church. Who are some of the partnerships that make all of this work possible? You've mentioned several people and places around the world.
Well, I think in particular, I really focus on the OIM connection, because being a former missionary through Missouri Synod, I always, felt that a lot of times people would come over there and they'd have their own ideas. And those of us who were on the field, we lauded them for their mission heart and zeal, but a lot of times they didn't know the particulars on the ground. And so I think maybe having served as a missionary for close to 13 years, I can understand that a little bit better. And so one of the things I try to really do is connect with our own missionaries and say, you know better than we do what you need. Tell us what you need. How can we help you? And since I've known Ted for quite a while, we've been able to do this. We've worked closely with all the regional directors. Being formerly based in Russia, Pastor James Krikova now I've worked very closely with on many of these projects. Just, now that he's in the States, getting him on the phone and just saying, hey, how are things going? We're doing this translation through your person here, making sure everything's fine. Maybe the translator has a different idea. What do you think, Jim? And I think that's probably been our strongest partnership.
That's beautiful. Just seeing the collaboration among missionaries and partners to bring these great resources to support people in their faith. And it sounds like even congregations as well, not just at home, but in the congregational setting as well. Great resources.
Oh yeah. And of course we get so much support from people here in the States as they hear the need and the desire to spread the gospel throughout the world. They're more than eager to do that. And we just try to show them that, we work in tandem with those mission organizations within our own church, so that we can kind of work together. We can do so much more together than we can when we're kind of working at cross purposes at times.
Well, we've been talking a lot about resources in the Spanish language and serving those communities. And I want to learn more about how LHF is serving in other parts of the world as well. We're talking with the Reverend Dr. Matthew Heise, Executive Director of Lutheran Heritage Foundation. We have more to share here on the Coffee Hour. I'm Andy Bates.
I'm Sarah Golseth.
You're a miracle. You know that, right? A living, breathing, one-of-a-kind miracle. You were created to stand apart, to share your gifts in the service of others, to make an uncommon impact in a common world. And at Concordia University, it's our mission to help you do that, to live uncommon. To learn more about Concordia, go to cuw.edu.
Welcome back to the Coffee Hour. I'm Andy Bates.
I'm Sarah Golseth.
We're talking with the Reverend Dr. Matthew Heise, Executive Director of Lutheran Heritage Foundation, learning about the ways that the Lord has used LHF to bring, and is currently using LHF to bring the gospel, these gospel resources to people in their first language around the world. Am I using the right term there? Is it first language? How would you describe it, Dr. Heise?
Yeah, I'd say first native language. I think first language is good.
So
makes sense.
we've talked about how LHF has been able to partner with missionaries and organizations to bring resources in Spanish language to many people. What are some other languages you're working in, and other countries and communities you're working to bring these gospel resources to?
Yeah. Where do I begin? We're actually up to about 120 languages now. I remember when I could estimate about 100, and now we've jumped to 120. And as I was mentioning to you that our Pastor Robert Ron, we translated his gospel booklet, Jesus Never Fails. It's really something very short. It's maybe about 4 or 5 pages, but it's this notion of, you're going to fail in your life, and people will fail you, and things will fail you, and ultimately your health will fail you, but Jesus will never fail you. And we've been able now, not only in English, because actually I want to say how important it is in English. We've given this out to some people and they say, hey, I'd like to use the English version with friends of mine who don't know Christ, or in prison settings. And we said, sure, we have them in English. But we've been doing that now in 24 different languages. And one of the more intriguing ones is Telugu in India. For me, I say intriguing because I know 5 years ago, and I was stunned to know this, that Detroit had a world conference of the Telugu language, world conference based in Detroit. And my old classmate, Pastor Tony Bose, who's pastor of Faith Lutheran in Troy, Michigan here, and who really founded a lot of the Bosnian mission there in St. Louis when he was a student with me then. I've connected a lot with Pastor Tony, and he said, I've got a group of 25 people who are Telugu speakers. What do you have? And I was ashamed to say, we don't have much of anything. And I kick myself at that now. And now that, we're beginning to, it's finding the right translators and people who can do this sort of thing. And so we connected with Telugu speakers through our LHF India coordinator, Cherub Sundaram. And so now we're beginning to get some materials in Telugu. And that's so important, especially with all the Indian languages. Given what's going on in India today, I was Zooming last week with Cherub in India while I was here in the Detroit area, and he was telling me that there is a new government law. I mean, the government is very Hindu oriented, and there is a new law that will clamp down on NGOs and primarily Christian NGOs. So he kind of warned us this is coming in the future, and for us to send funds, it might be a little bit more complicated. Bigger organizations like Compassion International have already been shut down. So we're small enough that we can kind of fly under the radar. But those are some of the difficulties of, people say, why would you want to preach the gospel in India? Well, this is the reality of what many of them face. So once again, to be able to get books into their hands, into the hands of people, so they can read God's word and read that message of comfort that Hinduism will never give them is really important. So we just finished this now in Punjabi. That's the far north of India on the border of Pakistan. There is a small fledgling Lutheran church there in Punjabi region. So that's one we've been working at. In fact, I think my first day in the office here back in April 2014, Pastor Ron just dropped a big stack of papers on my desk. He says, it's your problem now. It was the Punjabi catechism. And believe me, we've been searching and working, and finally that's coming to fruition as well. So I'm happy to say that. So India certainly is one area. And you had talked to me about Transylvania. Would you like me to go into that area as well?
Yes, please.
Okay, yeah. Well, I was actually there a couple of years ago when I didn't have to virtual travel and I could physically travel. And there I connected with an OIM Alliance missionary. That's a local person with whom our mission and Pastor Krikova were working closely. It's Reverend Sorin Horia Trifa, and he's based in Bucharest, Romania, but he's originally from the Transylvanian region. And so I went traveling with him there, and he was showing me that actually there was a strong Lutheran presence there because you had many Saxon Germans who had resettled there back in the 12th century. And actually, not too long ago, I connected to a person who read our article, and he's a member of an LCMS congregation. He was born there in that region. He's about 79 years old. He's in Indiana, and he says, I was born in that region and baptized in a Lutheran church. But then, of course, became a Hungarian Lutheran, and nowadays nobody knows much German and maybe even less Hungarian. Now Romanian, of course, is the dominant language. And so these churches are very moribund. They're kind of dead. They're beautiful old Gothic churches, and yet really not used for much of anything except concerts. And the theology had become quite liberal. So people would just kind of go there to maybe hear some German language. And so Pastor Soren wanted to get back up there and get booklets and other materials into the Romanian language, which most of them speak. And so naturally we were up there and, we had to go see Dracula's castle. It's one of the sites on the way up there. And as we went there, one of the unique things before you enter, it's Bran, Romania, Bran, Bran. And as you're entering into the town, you see all these homes with crosses on them on the top. And I said, what's going on here? I mean, is it kind of, I've read enough about Dracula that, of course, you hold the cross up before him and he goes, ah, but, what he was telling me is he said, yeah, there's a lot of mysticism here. And the notion of the cross was almost just a protective talisman, something that would protect you, with very little understanding of what Jesus did on that cross. It was almost like, protect me from the vampires, protect me from evil forces. And so even, here you're in Eastern Europe, there is still that kind of mindset, especially as you get into regions like Transylvania. And so to be able to get faith-affirming books from a Lutheran perspective into the hands of people there is just so important.
Mm-hmm. Where are some of the other places that you've been able to ship books to recently, even in the midst of the pandemic and things being a little strange for everyone?
Oh yeah, it's interesting. The shipping has continued, especially since we do a lot of our work over in Asia, and I always tell people that our primary printer in Bangkok, Thailand, is a Buddhist, and he's done more for the kingdom of God than many Christians have. We always hope and pray that one day the message moves in his heart, but he's very good with us. He's very patient on paying debts and so forth. He says, you're good for the money, don't worry. And the quality of the print is so good that we end up shipping a lot to Africa. So on November 29, we had a slew of books that are on their way to be shipped to Ethiopia. And, that'll come through the port of Djibouti. And we've kind of worked out some of the kinks and problems we had with previous shipments, because we had books stuck there in a port for about a year, which of course wasn't a whole lot of fun trying to get books released. And so now we have a better system, and we'll get those books, especially with Ethiopia, with the growing Lutheran Mekane Yesus Church there, just growing by leaps and bounds. And we are now beginning to work in many different languages. One of our board members is Pastor Zeret Johannes, who pastors a congregation of many African immigrants here in Lansing, Michigan. And Zeret is a native speaker of Eritrean. And so we're actually beginning to do work in Eritrean, and he is completing some work on catechism work right there. So we're going to have a lot of things going into Ethiopia and Eritrea just to the north. And we hope on December 18, we'll have a slew of books going into Kenya. Kenya has been really hit by COVID in a sense because the hospitals aren't very large, and so we had a worker from Finland there who really can't be in Kenya right now because there's so few hospital beds that would be difficult for him and his family. So to get those books into the hands of people is so important. And one of our Kenyan translators had shown us just a lot of kids kind of sitting up against a wall, and they weren't doing much of anything in his neighborhood. And so he started handing out Bible story books in Swahili. And so they started doing their own reading sessions. I mean, these are the things that even my Indian coordinator, Cherub Sundaram, was telling me, that he says, we just have so many kids with time on their hands, and they need to get good materials into in their language, something that they can understand. So that's really important for us to get those there. So shipping continues, and translation work continues, despite shutdowns, lockdowns. As Apostle Paul might say, the word is not bound. It continues to go out.
Thanks be to God. We have just a couple of minutes left, and you had mentioned that you spend a lot of time traveling virtually this year using Zoom and other resources to connect virtually. Where are you headed next, whether it's virtually or in person?
Well, I'm actually headed to Georgia next. No, not our Georgia, but the country of Georgia on Friday. As I said, this week was Latvia, Lithuania, and Georgia. So Georgia's coming up. Last week was India and Finland. And the week before that was Russia. So I'm trying to, and I'll probably connect with Pastor Trifa also in Romania, hopefully in the coming days as well. So the travels will continue there, and And so Georgia's next on the list of places to travel to virtually. And I think in many ways we're all going to be a little bit more cautious about how much money we spend on traveling, and making sure we can use the resources that God gives us to be able to get more of these books into people's hands.
Dr. Heise, how can congregations or individuals, or maybe even Sunday schools or schools, Lutheran schools, learn more about Lutheran Heritage Foundation?
Well, they can go to lhfmissions.org, and we have a lot on there. And I just should, as you mentioned that, also say that the Lutheran Heritage Foundation is the preferred or the chosen RSO for Michigan LCMS schools for this year. So we are receiving the offerings of the third quarter of the school year. So I have been actually not virtually, but physically getting into a lot of LCMS schools. I was just in St. Peter's, Richmond, Michigan yesterday. And these are great opportunities for us to connect with kids. I've got to learn how to keep my mask on when I'm talking, and then take it off. And then when I get closer to the kids again and show them a book, put it back on. But we're all working around this, and God's word goes forth.
Amen. His word certainly does go forth. His word endures forever. The Reverend Dr. Matthew Heise, Executive Director of Lutheran Heritage Foundation. Thank you so much for joining us on the Coffee Hour today and giving us an update from the Lutheran Heritage Foundation and the great work that you're doing.
Thanks so much for your support.
You're listening to the Coffee Hour. I'm Andy Bates.
I'm Sarah Gulseth.
The Coffee Hour with Andy and Sarah is a production of KFUO. To support the Coffee Hour and KFUO Radio, visit KFUO.org. You can also text KFUO to 41444 or send an email to gifts@KFUO.org. And you can call us at 800-844-0524. KFUO. Christ for you, anytime, anywhere.